The world is loud. It moves with a relentless, hurried pace, demanding our attention, our energy, our immediate response. But there are quiet rituals woven into the fabric of our days, moments of gentle pause that allow the world to slow down, if only for a breath. Welcome to the Gentle Economics channel. This is an audio-first documentary designed specifically for sleep, a quiet, nostalgic journey into the gentle economics of a place that promised knowledge to everyone, the public library. We begin our journey not with a book, but with a philosophy. The public library, as we know it, is a profound anomaly in the landscape of modern economics. It is a space defined by absence, the absence of a price tag, the absence of a sales pitch, the absence of a profit motive. It is a sanctuary of silence, a place where the only currency required is curiosity. The earliest libraries were not public at all. They were the exclusive domain of temples, monasteries, and the elite. To access knowledge was to possess power, and that power was carefully guarded. The shift from a private, guarded collection to a public, open resource is one of the most significant yet quiet economic revolutions in history. It represents a fundamental reevaluation of what constitutes value in a society. The true, gentle economics of the library began with the concept of the People's University. This idea, championed by thinkers in the 19th century, posited that a functioning democracy required an educated populace, and that education should not be a privilege reserved for the wealthy. The library became the physical manifestation of this democratic ideal, a place where the laborer and the scholar could stand on equal footing, accessing the same volumes. This philosophy found its most powerful champion in Andrew Carnegie. The story of Carnegie's libraries is often told as a tale of philanthropy, but it is also a masterclass in leveraging private wealth for public infrastructure. Carnegie, a man who amassed one of the world's great fortunes, believed that the best way to distribute wealth was not through charity, but through providing the tools for self-improvement. He famously stated, "A library outranks any other one thing a community can do to benefit its people." Carnegie's model was not a simple handout. It was a contract, a quiet partnership between the philanthropist and the community. He would provide the funds for the building, but the community had to agree to two crucial economic commitments. First, to provide the land, and second, to perpetually fund the library's operation and maintenance through local taxes. This model ensured that the library was not merely a monument to a rich man, but a sustainable, locally owned institution. It was a brilliant piece of gentle economics engineering, forcing local governments to commit to the long-term, non-profit value of knowledge. The architecture of the Carnegie Libraries reflects this philosophy of quiet dignity. They were often built in the neoclassical style, with grand columns, marble staircases, and high ceilings. This was not mere vanity. It was a deliberate statement. The library was a temple of knowledge, a place that conferred respect and importance upon the act of reading and learning. By making the public library feel as grand as a bank or a government building, Carnegie elevated the status of the common citizen who walked through its doors. Consider the economic implications of a single book in a public library. That book, purchased once, can be read by dozens, perhaps hundreds, of people over its lifespan. The cost per reading drops exponentially with each use. This is a radical form of shared economy, predating modern concepts of subscription services and communal ownership by over a century. The library maximizes the utility of a physical asset in a way that no private market can replicate. The silence within the library is also an economic factor in a world saturated with noise, the clamor of commerce, the endless notifications of the digital age. Silence has become a luxury. The library offers this luxury freely. It is a space for deep work, for contemplation, for the slow, deliberate process of absorbing information. This quiet environment is an investment in the human capital of the community, fostering the concentration and critical thinking skills that are essential for long-term economic growth. The library's collection itself is a quiet economic indicator. It is a reflection of the community's needs, its history, and its aspirations. The shelves hold not just fiction and history, but also tax forms, job application guides, and resources for small business owners. The library is a silent partner in the local economy, providing the foundational tools for entrepreneurship and employment without ever demanding a fee. The very act of browsing the stacks is an exercise in serendipity, an economic model of discovery that is antithetical to the targeted algorithms of the digital world. In a library, you might go looking for a book on gardening and accidentally discover a volume on urban planning, leading to an unexpected spark of inspiration. This unplanned discovery is a form of intellectual cross-pollination that is invaluable, yet impossible to quantify on a balance sheet. It is the gentle, unpredictable engine of innovation. The library is also a crucial element of economic equity. For a student whose home lacks internet access or whose family cannot afford the latest textbooks, the library is the great equalizer. It provides access to the same digital databases, the same reference materials, and the same quiet study space as those who are more privileged. This commitment to universal access is the quiet moral center of the library's economic model. It is a silent protest against the idea that knowledge should be gated by wealth. The gentle rhythm of the library, the soft thud of a returned book, the quiet shuffle of feet on the carpet, the turning of a page, is a reminder that not all value is loud. Some of the most profound economic forces are the quiet ones, the slow accumulation of knowledge, the patient development of a skill, the shared resource that asks nothing in return. The library is a testament to the enduring belief that an investment in the mind of one citizen is an investment in the future of all. The quiet power of the library is perhaps best understood through the lens of opportunity cost. In a market economy, every choice involves a trade-off. To buy a book is to forego other purchases. To pay for a subscription is to commit to a recurring expense. The library eliminates this cost for the individual. By offering free access to a vast array of resources, it effectively lowers the barrier to entry for self-education, career advancement, and cultural enrichment. This is a subtle but profound economic subsidy, a quiet investment in the human capital of the community that pays dividends in the form of innovation, civic engagement, and social mobility. Consider the library's role in the digital age. While many predicted the demise of the physical library with the rise of the internet, the opposite has proven true. The library has quietly adapted, becoming a crucial provider of digital equity. For those without home internet access, the library offers free Wi-Fi and computer terminals, a lifeline to the modern economy. This service is not just about convenience, It is about access to job applications, government services, and educational platforms. The library acts as a silent, essential utility, bridging the digital divide and ensuring that the economic opportunities of the Internet are available to all, regardless of income. The library's economic model is also one of anti-obsolescence. In the fast-paced world of technology, devices and software quickly become outdated. The library, however, constantly refreshes its resources, providing access to the latest software, 3D printers, and digital tools that would be prohibitively expensive for many individuals. This quiet commitment to staying current means that the community always has access to the tools of the future, a service that private enterprise cannot offer without a significant cost to the consumer. The physical structure of the library itself is an exercise in sustainable infrastructure. Many of the grand Carnegie buildings have stood for over a century, a testament to durable, quality construction. They are quiet anchors in their neighborhoods, often surviving the economic booms and busts that have seen surrounding businesses come and go. This longevity is an economic advantage, a low-maintenance asset that continues to generate value year after year. The library is a quiet reminder that the most valuable investments are often the ones built to last. The library also functions as a vital hub for social capital. It hosts quiet programs for job seekers, literacy classes for new immigrants, and story times for children. These services, while not directly generating revenue, create a foundation of trust, knowledge, and community connection. This social capital is the invisible glue that holds a healthy local economy together. It fosters a sense of belonging and mutual support, reducing the need for more expensive social services down the line. The library is a quiet preventative measure against social and economic fragmentation. The gentle rhythm of the library is a lesson in patient investment. Unlike the stock market, which demands immediate returns, the library operates on a timescale measured in generations. A child who learns to read in the library today may become the entrepreneur or the civic leader of tomorrow. The return on this investment is slow, quiet, and profound, often taking decades to fully materialize. This long-term perspective is a powerful counterpoint to the short-term demands of the market, offering a model for sustainable, enduring value creation. The library is a quiet, powerful anomaly, a space where the rules of the market are suspended and the value of a human being is measured not by their wallet, but by their potential. It is a testament to the enduring belief that knowledge should be free and that the quiet pursuit of wisdom is the most valuable economic activity of all. We will now transition to the quiet logistics of how these books actually move from the printing press to the shelf, a journey of surprising complexity and gentle efficiency. After the big idea of the library, knowledge without a price tag, we can step into the daily reality of the building itself. Because the library isn't only a philosophy, it's a system that wakes up every morning and tries to be ready for whoever walks in. Before the doors open, the first work is simple and practical. Lights come on section by section. The building shifts from night mode to public mode. Staff unlock doors, disable alarms, and do the quick checks that keep a quiet space functioning. Temperature, bathrooms, entryways, service desks. Computers wake up next. Screens light. Networks connect. Printers get tested. The library's calm depends on these ordinary things working without drama. because for many patrons, the library is their most reliable access to a working computer, stable internet, and a place where they can focus. Then comes the returns bin. The book drop is the library's main intake valve, where borrowed items re-enter the shared system. Someone opens the bin and pulls out what arrived overnight. The point isn't just that items came back, it's that the loop is continuing: borrow, return, reuse. The library economy runs on this rhythm more than on any single purchase. Returns are scanned into the system so the library knows what's back, what's still out, and what can move to the next person. Items get sorted into categories, goes back on local shelves, goes to another branch, goes to a hold shelf, goes to repair, or gets flagged if something is missing. It's quiet logistics, small decisions repeated hundreds of times, so the public side stays simple. Carts start rolling, shelving begins. A library looks effortless when it's open, but that effortless feeling is the result of constant restoration. Books drift out of order all day long, and the staff quietly brings the place back to readable shape. As opening time gets closer, the building becomes more intentional. Chairs get straightened, study rooms get checked, signage gets adjusted, any overnight mess is handled. The goal isn't perfection, it's readiness. And then the doors open. The first few minutes usually reveal what the library is doing for that community right now. People arrive to print documents, fill out forms, use the computers, pick up holds, return items, ask questions, find a quiet seat. Some come for a specific title. Others come because it's one of the only places where you can exist without being expected to spend money. This is an underrated economic service, dependable space. The library offers a predictable environment with few demands. It's climate-controlled, quiet by design, staffed by people whose job is to help rather than sell. In a world where most public indoor space is attached to consumption, that alone is a kind of relief. If you're listening to this to sleep, you don't need to track every step. Just hold on to the gentle sequence: the lights, the doors, the computers, the returns bin, small routines that make the library feel stable. Next, we'll move from the daily rhythm to the less visible structure behind it: the budget, the planning, and the ongoing costs that allow free to keep happening. The quiet choreography of space, zones, signage, furniture that teaches behavior. Once the library is open, a different kind of work takes over, work that isn't loud but is constant. The building starts guiding people without needing to speak. A well-run library doesn't rely on rules shouted from the front desk. It relies on design. The space itself does much of the communicating. You can feel it as you walk in. There's usually a transition zone near the entrance, open, practical, a little more active. It's where people return items, ask quick questions, check out materials, pick up holds. This area is built for short tasks and brief conversations, so the energy of arrival doesn't spill into the quieter parts of the building. Then the library divides into zones. Some zones are meant for browsing and movement. The stacks invite slow wandering, wide enough aisles, end caps that face outward, displays that offer a gentle "start here." This is where curiosity is encouraged, where looking around is normal, where you don't have to know exactly what you need. Other zones are meant for staying. Study tables, carrels, and reading chairs create an entirely different expectation. A table says, you can spread out. A carrel says, you can disappear into your work. A row of chairs says, you can sit quietly without an agenda. This is one of the subtle economic decisions inside the library. It provides multiple kinds of value at once: The same building supports quick transactions, long attention, and unplanned discovery without charging different prices for each use. Signage helps, but it's usually restrained. In a library, the best signs don't scold. They clarify, they label, they point. Quiet study. Children's. Reference. Computers. Restrooms. The goal is not control. It's reducing friction so people can move through the space without needing permission at every step. And then there's the furniture, which quietly teaches behavior more than any sign ever could. Low shelves in a children's area make books reachable and safe. Softer seating signals comfort and longer stays. Harder chairs near computer stations signal shorter use and faster turnover. Tables placed in open sightlines encourage calm self-regulation. Tucked away corners encourage deep focus. Even the distance between seats matters. A few extra inches can change whether a room feels crowded or settled. Libraries also use layout to manage sound. Children's zones are often set apart, not because noise is wrong, but because different kinds of learning make different kinds of sound. Group study rooms, meeting rooms, and community spaces are usually placed so they can be active without taking over the whole building. Quiet zones are protected by distance, walls, carpeting, and the simple act of putting the noisiest services nearer to the front. None of this is accidental. It's long-term trial and adjustment. Libraries watch what happens in the building and quietly redesign around real use. Where people naturally gather, where bottlenecks form, where sound carries, where seats fill up first, where confusion keeps repeating. Over time, the space becomes a kind of practical wisdom. And this is part of what makes a public library feel different from most public places. It doesn't demand that people behave well through pressure. It makes good behavior easier through design. It reduces conflict by reducing confusion. It supports quiet by making quiet comfortable. It makes room for many kinds of patrons by giving each kind of activity a place to land. In the gentle economics of the library, space is not just real estate. Space is service. And the way that service is delivered through zones, signage, and furniture is one of the library's most invisible forms of competence. It works best when you hardly notice it at all. Small sounds as structure and the building as a promise of stability. One of the easiest ways to understand what a library does is to listen to it, not to the big moments. No announcements, no music, no sales, just the small repeating sounds that hold the place together. In a library, sound isn't entertainment, it's structure. A scanner chirps when an item is checked in or checked out. That little beep is the system updating itself, quietly keeping track of shared property so it can keep circulating fairly. A cart rolls across carpet, not fast, not urgent, just steady. The cart is a reminder that the library runs on restoration. Items returning, being sorted, being returned to their places, ready for the next person. There are soft conversations, too, short and practical. A question asked at the desk, a quick clarification, a librarian helping someone translate a need into a search term or into the right shelf or into the right form. These exchanges are usually calm because the building is designed to keep them calm. Even when someone is stressed, the space tends to lower the temperature of the moment. And then there's the printer. If you want a single symbol of the modern library's role in the local economy, it might be that shared printer. It's the place where job applications become real paper, where court documents and school forms get finished, where resumes are printed, where someone's next step stops being digital intention and becomes a physical page they can carry out the door. Printers are not glamorous, but they are one of the library's most practical tools. small, stubborn machines that quietly connect people to systems that still require paperwork. These sounds, beeps, rolling wheels, low voices, the steady churn of printing do something important. They create a feeling of order. They make the library feel like a place where things are handled, tracked, completed, and put back. And that feeling leads into the deeper promise the library makes: stability. Most people experience modern life as constantly shifting. Hours change, policies change, passwords change, prices change. Even basic services can feel unpredictable. The library, by contrast, is built to be consistent. Same doors, same desks, same basic expectations. The rules are simple and long-lived. Keep things reasonably quiet, share the space, return what you borrow. Even the schedule itself becomes part of the value. The library opens when it says it will. It closes when it says it will. It doesn't require a purchase to enter. It doesn't ask you to explain yourself to stay. That predictability is an economic service, especially for people whose lives don't contain much predictability elsewhere. The calm isn't accidental. It's maintained through routine, shelving, sorting, checking in, checking out, keeping the environment readable and usable. The library isn't quiet because nothing is happening. It's quiet because the work is designed to be steady, repeatable, and mostly invisible. So the next time you think of a library, it can help to think beyond the books. Think of the sound of a system that doesn't rush you. A building that, through small noises and steady hours, keeps making the same offer day after day. Come in, take what you need, use what you can, and when you're ready, bring it back. From the outside, the library can feel almost effortless. The doors open, the lights are on, the shelves are stocked, the internet works. The room is warm in winter and cool in summer. And because the library doesn't charge at the entrance, it can seem, as a feeling, like it simply exists. But free is not a magical category. It is a funding decision, renewed again and again, so that the public experience can remain simple. Most public libraries are supported through local public funding. The exact structure varies from place to place, but the mechanics are usually familiar. The community collects money through local taxes and designated levies, and a portion of that revenue is set aside to operate the library. Sometimes the library is its own district. Sometimes it's connected to a city, county, or regional system. Sometimes multiple towns share a network. However it's arranged, the idea is the same. The cost is distributed broadly so that no single visit has to involve a transaction. This is the core trade the library makes with the community. Instead of pay per use, it becomes support it together. And once you see that, the library starts to look less like a charity and more like infrastructure, closer to a road, a park, or a public utility. You don't pay a toll each time you drive down a street. You fund the street so it can exist for everyone, all the time, whether you use it daily or only once a month. That shared funding is what pays for the things you rarely think about when you're browsing a shelf. Staffing is the largest part of most library budgets because the library is not just a building with books. It's a service, people answering questions, ordering and cataloging materials, running programs, maintaining a safe environment, helping patrons use technology, and keeping the daily system moving. Then there are the quiet building costs: electricity, heat, air conditioning, water, cleaning, repairs, insurance. The library has to be comfortable and stable because a place that is physically unpleasant stops being usable, especially for the people who rely on it most. Collections have their own ongoing costs. Print books, yes, but also audiobooks, children's materials, large print, newspapers, DVDs in some places, and increasingly, the licensed digital services that people use without ever touching a shelf. Those digital databases, ebooks, and learning platforms aren't free to the library. They are paid subscriptions and licenses that renew year after year. Technology is another category that quietly grows. Computers age out, Wi-Fi needs upgrading, security and privacy systems need maintenance, even basic software changes over time. The library absorbs those shifts so patrons don't have to. What's remarkable is how little of this is visible when the library is working well. A good library budget doesn't draw attention to itself. It produces normality, open hours that don't fluctuate, a printer that works most of the time, chairs that don't wobble, a room that feels calm and predictable. And that predictability, more than any single book or program, is one of the real products the library delivers. So when we talk about the budget nobody sees, we're really talking about a community paying for something subtle, a place where the public doesn't have to do math at the door. No menu, no upgrade, no members-only tier. Just a steady public promise, kept quietly through planning, maintenance, and the slow, careful work of making free sustainable. Line items, staff, utilities, insurance, building maintenance, databases, books. If you could sit down with a library budget, it would look more ordinary than most people expect. Not dramatic, not mysterious, just a list of practical needs that keep the building open and dependable. And that ordinariness is the point. A library succeeds when it feels stable. The budget is what quietly manufactures that stability. Staff is usually the largest line item. This isn't because libraries are expensive, but because libraries are labor. People select and order materials, catalog them, shelve them, repair them, run programs, help patrons use technology, answer questions, manage holds, keep the space safe, and make the whole system feel human instead of automated. Even in a building full of books, the real service is often guidance, someone helping you find the right thing or do the next step without making you feel rushed or embarrassed. Utilities come next, and they're more important than they sound. Heat in winter, air conditioning in summer, electricity for lights, computers, and networking. These are not luxuries in a public space. They're what make the library usable. A library that is too cold, too hot, too dim, or unreliable becomes a place people avoid, and the promise of access quietly breaks. Insurance is one of those invisible costs that exists precisely so nothing has to be said about it. The library is responsible for a building, for equipment, for public use of space, and for the normal risks that come with serving thousands of people a year. Insurance is the quiet backbone that allows openness. Doors unlocked, rooms available, chairs offered without fear. Building maintenance is a long list of small realities: cleaning, repairs, carpets, restrooms, roof work, HVAC servicing, elevator inspections if there is one, snow removal in winter, lawn care in summer. None of it feels like library when you think about books, but without it, the library stops being comfortable, then stops being trusted, and eventually stops being used. Then there are the materials that people think of first. Books are an ongoing expense, not a one-time purchase. Libraries are constantly replacing worn copies, adding new titles, updating outdated information, maintaining children's collections that take heavy use, and keeping enough variety that the shelves reflect the community. A library collection is not static. It's a living inventory that has to match real demand. And now, increasingly, one of the biggest quiet costs is databases and digital services. These are the research tools, learning platforms, and online collections people access from home. Articles, reference databases, language learning, genealogy resources, ebooks, audiobooks. Most of these are licensed, subscription-based products. The library pays to provide access, and patrons experience it as simply available. It's one of the strangest parts of modern library economics. The library still feels like the old world of shelves, but it's also paying for the invisible world of contracts and renewals. Put together, these line items explain why a library's free experience is actually the result of careful, ongoing budgeting, not flashy spending, not growth for growth's sake, just enough staff, enough maintenance, enough heat and light, enough books, enough digital access, so the building can keep making the same simple offer every day. Come in, use what you need, and leave without a receipt. Why free still costs. The economics of being open to everyone. When people say the library is free, what they usually mean is something very specific. It doesn't ask you to pay at the moment you need it. No cashier, no checkout lane, no members-only gate. That is a real kind of freedom, but it doesn't mean the library is costless. It means the costs are handled upstream, so the experience at the door can stay calm and equal. In most markets, access is filtered by price. If you can pay, you enter. If you can't, you adapt, postpone, or go it out. The library is built on a different logic. Access is a public good, and the community pays for it in a shared way so that usage doesn't require proof of wealth. Economically, that decision creates a set of responsibilities that private spaces can avoid. A private business can choose its customers by raising prices. A library cannot. It is designed to be open to everyone, the organized and the disorganized, the well-resourced and the under-resourced, the confident and the overwhelmed, the person who needs a single book and the person who needs a safe place for a few hours. Being open to everyone means the library has to plan for wide variation in need. It means longer hours, not because more hours is impressive, but because people's lives aren't scheduled the same way. It means staff trained to handle a wide range of questions, from literature to printers to government forms to basic tech troubleshooting. It means investing in spaces that can serve different kinds of patrons at the same time. Quiet study, children's activity, public computers, community rooms. It also means the library carries costs that aren't tied neatly to popularity. In a store, if something isn't profitable, it disappears. In a library, the goal is not to maximize sales. The goal is to maintain a meaningful collection and service. That includes materials that might not circulate constantly, but matter deeply when they're needed. Reference works, local history, language learning resources, health information, test prep, legal guides, large print, accessibility tools. A library also absorbs the economics of fairness. Fairness has procedures. Loan periods, holds, renewals, wait lists, late policies, replacement policies. These are not there to punish anyone. They exist to protect the shared system. A library is constantly balancing generosity with sustainability, making access easy without letting the collection collapse into loss. And then there's the quiet cost of simply providing a public indoor space. A library has to be clean, safe, climate-controlled, well-lit, maintained, insured. It has to have functioning bathrooms. It has to have seating that lasts. It has to have technology that works consistently. These are physical costs that never disappear because the library's product is not only information, it's a dependable environment for learning, searching, and thinking. So free still costs because the library is doing something economically unusual. It is offering access without transaction. And when you remove the transaction, you don't remove the cost. You relocate it, you distribute it, you turn it into a shared commitment, paid in small portions by many people, so that any one person can walk in on a difficult day and still be treated the same as anyone else. That is the economics of being open to everyone. Not charity, not a discount. A deliberate design choice to fund the doorway together so nobody has to negotiate with it alone. The calm discipline of annual planning and predictable constraints. A library's calm doesn't happen by accident. It's built in advance, 1 year at a time, through planning that is deliberately unexciting. Annual planning is where the library turns a broad promise, "We will be here for you," into a list of practical commitments it can actually keep. Most library budgets aren't designed for surprise. They're designed for continuity. The goal is not to win the year or chase growth, but to keep the building open, staffed, stocked, and stable across ordinary days. That kind of stability requires discipline because the library can't simply raise prices when costs rise. It has to work within a predictable funding envelope and still meet a wide range of needs. So planning tends to start with the essentials. Hours come first because hours define access. Staffing follows because staffing defines service. Utilities, maintenance, and technology follow because if the building becomes unreliable, the entire mission weakens. Collections and databases are then adjusted within what's possible, adding what's needed, delaying what can wait, replacing what is worn out, and making careful choices about what the community is most likely to use. This is where predictable constraints matter. The library can't buy everything. It can't subscribe to every database. It can't staff every desk the way it would in a perfect world. It can't keep every branch open late every night. And yet, it still has to feel dependable. So libraries learn to make decisions that are less about abundance and more about balance. Enough copies of high-demand materials, enough variety to serve different interests, enough new titles to stay current, enough preservation to keep older materials usable. The budgeting mindset is quiet and practical. Not what would be amazing, but what can we sustain? Constraints also force a kind of clarity that many organizations avoid. When money is limited and the mission is broad, the library has to repeatedly answer a gentle, difficult question. What matters most right now? Is it keeping hours stable? Expanding children's programming? Replacing aging computers? Maintaining the roof? Renewing a digital subscription that many people use from home? These decisions can look mundane on paper, but they shape how the community experiences the library. A library that invests in comfortable space is investing in attention. A library that invests in technology is investing in access. A library that invests in staff is investing in dignity, because help is part of what makes a public system feel humane. What's unusual is how calm all of this planning tends to be. There's rarely a big reveal, no flashy product launch, no dramatic pivot. The library is more like a ship that stays on course, adjusting gently for weather. That steadiness is part of the service. People come to the library expecting it to feel familiar. The same categories, the same quiet rules, the same basic reliability. In the gentle economics of public libraries, annual planning is not just accounting. It's the methodical practice of keeping a promise within limits, without letting the limits become the story. The limits are always there, But the experience the library tries to create is this. Even with constraints, even with budgets, even with the ordinary realities of maintenance and staffing, the doors still open, and the quiet continues. Acquisition, selection, vendor pricing, editions, processing. When you buy a book for yourself, it can be simple. You choose a title, you pay the price on the sticker, and you take it home. The cost is mostly visible, and the relationship is mostly personal. A library buys differently, because a library isn't buying a book for one reader. It's adding a unit to a shared collection, something that has to survive many hands, many checkouts, and many months or years of circulation. That changes what the price of a book really means. The first cost is selection, and selection is a form of planning. Libraries don't just chase bestsellers. They try to build a collection that reflects a community. Different ages, different reading levels, different languages, different interests, different needs. Selection is guided by reviews, professional lists, local demand, patron requests, and the library's own goals for balance. It's not a perfect science. It's careful guessing, done responsibly. Then comes vendor pricing. Libraries often buy through vendors rather than buying the same way an individual does. Vendors provide ordering systems, invoicing, discounts, and services that reduce the labor of buying at scale. The goal isn't bargain hunting. The goal is predictable procurement, reliable supply, consistent additions, and a workflow that fits public operations. And those additions matter. A library may need a hardcover because it lasts longer. It may need a large print edition because access means readability. It may choose specific formats that work with its lending system, sturdy bindings, library-friendly covers, and versions that hold up under repeated use. Even when the content is the same, the library is selecting for durability and inclusion, not just preference. Finally, there's processing, the part that turns a purchased object into a circulating public asset. Processing includes the practical steps that make a book belong to the library: catalog records, call numbers, barcodes, spine labels, ownership stamps, protective covers, and security tagging. A book that hasn't been processed can't reliably live in a public system. It can't be tracked, shelved, located, or protected. Processing is the bridge between private property and shared property. This is where the hidden price starts to reveal itself. The cost of a library book is not just the book. It's the work required to make it findable, borrowable, returnable, and reusable. And the reason libraries buy differently than people do is simple. They aren't purchasing a reading experience. They're building infrastructure, one title at a time, so that the next 100 readers can encounter that same book as if it was always meant to be there. Invisible costs, cataloging, labels, barcodes, protective covers. A library book doesn't become a library book just because the library owns it. It becomes a library book when it can live inside a shared system, when it can be found, tracked, shelved, borrowed, returned, and found again. That transformation has costs most people never see. The first invisible cost is cataloging. Cataloging is the work of giving a book a precise identity inside the library's universe. It means creating or importing a record with the author, title, subject headings, publication details, format, and the classification that determines where it will sit. Done well, cataloging is not just data entry, it's navigation. It's what lets a patron search for gardening in Ohio or beginner Spanish and actually get meaningful results. It's what connects one book to related books. It's what turns a shelf into a searchable map. Then come the labels, small pieces of paper that quietly keep the building organized. The spine label is essentially the book's address. It tells staff and patrons where it belongs and makes reshelving possible at scale. Without labels, order collapses quickly, and the library becomes frustrating to use. Barcodes are next. A barcode is how the book becomes trackable. It's how the system knows what's checked out, what's overdue, what's on hold, what's missing, and what just came back through the return slot. The barcode is the book's link to the circulation network, the quiet accounting that makes a shared collection fair. And then there are the protective covers and reinforcement. Many library books get a clear jacket or a laminate cover not for aesthetics, but for survival. Corners get worn, covers get bent, spines get stressed. A little protection extends the lifespan of a book that will be handled far more than a privately owned copy. It's a small investment that reduces replacement costs later. These steps don't feel like reading, but they are part of what makes reading possible for the public. They are the practical scaffolding behind a simple experience. You walk in, you find what you want, and you take it home. In the gentle economics of libraries, the invisible costs are not wasteful extras. They are the costs of making a book shareable, of turning a single object into a community resource that can circulate for years, quietly doing its work, one checkout at a time. Repair and replacement, worn spines, missing pages, damaged items. A library book lives a harder life than a personal book. At home, a book might sit on one shelf, opened by one person, handled in one familiar way. In a library, a book becomes a traveling object. It gets carried in backpacks, stacked in cars, left on nightstands, dropped in return bins, slid across counters, and reshelved by different hands day after day. So where is not a surprise. It's part of the design. Over time, the signs appear, a spine loosening, a cover bending, pages starting to separate, corners softening. Sometimes it's nothing more than honest use. Sometimes it's real damage. Water, food stains, torn pages, writing in the margins, a DVD that skips, a children's book that comes back with a detached flap. There's also the simple reality of missing pages. A page can tear out by accident. It can be removed intentionally. It can go missing and nobody knows when. And in a public collection, one missing page can turn a book from usable to broken, especially for cookbooks, textbooks, workbooks, manuals, or anything where the missing part is the point. This is where the library has to make ongoing decisions that individuals rarely face. Do we repair it? Do we replace it? Do we withdraw it? Repair is its own quiet craft. Some items can be reinforced, re-glued, recovered, or rebound. Some can be cleaned and returned to circulation with a simple fix. The goal is not perfection. It's restoring function. If it can survive more checkouts safely, the library tries to keep it alive. Replacement is different. When an item is too damaged, or too old, or too popular for its condition, the library may buy another copy. But replacement isn't automatic, because libraries also have to consider demand and relevance. A torn bestseller might get replaced quickly. A dated computer manual might not. A local history book might be repaired rather than replaced, because the replacement may not exist anymore. And then there's the category nobody loves, items that simply don't come back. Lost materials are part of the real cost of being open. A shared system has to tolerate a certain amount of loss because the alternative would be harsh barriers, deposits, high fees, strict enforcement that turns the library from welcoming to intimidating. Most libraries try to keep the system humane, which means accepting that some percentage of items will disappear over time. So the library's collection is not a permanent museum. It's a working fleet, a circulating inventory that needs maintenance, triage, and periodic replacement, quietly managed so the public experience stays simple. Borrow, return, borrow again. This is one of the hidden truths behind the gentle economics of public libraries. The library doesn't just lend books. It continuously restores the conditions that make lending possible. The quiet truth. Libraries don't just buy books. They maintain a circulating fleet. It helps to think of a library collection the way you'd think of a fleet of vehicles. Not because books are machines, but because the logic is similar. The library is responsible for keeping a large set of shared assets in working condition so the public can rely on them. The goal isn't to own things. The goal is to keep things usable. When a library buys a book, that purchase is only the beginning of the cost. After that, the book enters circulation, and circulation is a long, quiet test of durability. It will be checked out and returned hundreds of times. It will be shelved and reshelved. It will be handled by careful readers and careless readers, by children and adults, by people reading at a table and people reading on the move. So the library manages the collection the way a competent operator manages a fleet, through constant upkeep and periodic replacement. There are routine maintenance tasks, reinforcing covers, replacing cases, cleaning, relabeling, updating records, correcting catalog errors, reattaching loose parts. These small actions keep items in service longer, which lowers the true cost per use. A small repair can buy dozens more checkouts. There are also performance decisions. Libraries pay attention to what's circulating and what isn't. A fleet has to match demand. If a title is constantly on hold, the library may add copies. If something never moves, the library may relocate it, weed it, or replace it with something more relevant. This isn't about being trendy. It's about using limited shelf space and limited budget in a way that serves the most people. And like any fleet, a library collection has a natural end-of-life cycle. Items age out. Information goes out of date. Physical materials wear down. Some books become too damaged to repair. Some formats become less useful as the world changes. The library has to retire things gently and continually, or the collection becomes cluttered and less navigable. This is why libraries buy differently than individuals do. An individual can buy for taste. A library has to buy for coverage, variety, balance, durability, accessibility, and long-term usefulness. It's not a book. It's one unit in a larger system that has to work at scale. The quiet truth is that the library doesn't function like a bookstore. A bookstore sells inventory and moves on. A library maintains inventory, keeps it alive, and sends it back out again. That is the deeper economics of the public library, not a pile of books, but a circulating fleet, quietly managed so the community can keep borrowing without having to think about what it takes to make borrowing possible. A library book doesn't appear on a shelf the way an item appears in a store. It arrives through a slow pipeline, part planning, part listening, part careful matching. The first step is selection, and selection is mostly quiet judgment. Libraries choose what to add by looking at a few steady inputs. One is professional review sources and recommendation lists, signals about quality, relevance, and demand. Another is patron requests, which are often the most direct form of community feedback the library receives. Someone asks for a title, a topic, a language, a format. and the library takes that request seriously, not as a purchase order, but as data about what the community is trying to read or learn. Selection is also about balance. A library can't become only new releases, because then it loses depth. But it also can't become only classics, because then it stops meeting the present. So it keeps a collection that has different kinds of time in it: the immediate and popular, the steady and evergreen, the specialized and quietly necessary. Balance also means serving different ages and uses. Children's books that will be handled constantly, teen materials that match real curiosity, adult fiction that people want for escape, nonfiction that supports practical needs, health, career, money, history, language learning, repair manuals, local topics, and then the less obvious but important categories: large print, audiobooks, translations, materials for different reading levels, and formats that make access possible for more people. Even within one topic, selection involves a calm kind of coverage. Not one book about a subject, but several angles: beginner, intermediate, and deep, popular, academic, and practical. A library doesn't just want to offer information, it wants to offer multiple doors into the same room. And because budgets and shelf space are limited, selection is always paired with restraint. A library might want 10 copies of a hot title, but only be able to justify 3. It might want an expansive set of books on every hobby, but have to choose the ones most likely to be used. It might see interest rising in one area: personal finance, test prep, home repair, mental health, and shift attention there without making the collection lopsided. This is the gentle economics behind the shelf. The library is constantly listening to the community, but it's also protecting the long-term usefulness of the collection. Selection is where the library decides what kind of place it wants to be this year. Not in a loud, promotional way, in a quiet, practical way that will eventually show up as something simple: a book you didn't have to buy, waiting in a familiar building, exactly where you hoped it would be. Ordering and receiving, shipments, invoices, checks. After a title is selected, the work becomes less philosophical and more administrative. This is the part of the pipeline that looks like any other organization: forms, systems, approvals, and the steady discipline of getting the right things delivered to the right place. Libraries typically order through established vendors. Vendors make it possible to buy at scale with consistent records, predictable invoicing, and ordering tools that fit library workflows. The goal is to reduce chaos. When you're managing thousands of items, simple is a real operational strategy. An order is placed, and then the waiting begins, quietly tracked in the background. Some items arrive quickly, others take time, especially if demand is high or editions are limited. Libraries may also consolidate orders, so shipments arrive in manageable batches rather than as a constant stream of single packages. When the boxes arrive, receiving starts. This is not the public-facing magic of new books. It's the practical moment of counting, matching, and verifying. Staff open shipments and confirm that what arrived is what was ordered: correct title, correct author, correct format, correct edition, correct quantity. Mistakes happen in any supply chain, so verification is part of keeping the collection accurate. Alongside the books are the paper trails that keep a public budget accountable. Invoices are matched to purchase orders. Costs are checked against what was approved. Discounts, service fees, or backorder notes are reviewed. If something is missing or damaged in transit, it's flagged right away so it can be corrected. This is the library doing what every responsible public institution has to do: prove that spending is real, documented, and traceable. Then come the internal checks, not just in the sense of payment, but in the sense of control. Libraries separate duties and build processes that prevent errors from quietly multiplying. Someone orders, someone receives, someone confirms, someone processes the payment. This isn't bureaucracy for its own sake. It's how a shared, publicly funded system protects trust. It's also where the library's calm begins to show its structure. When you walk in and see a new release sitting neatly on display, you're seeing the end of a chain of small confirmations: ordered correctly, received correctly, paid correctly, ready to be cataloged and prepared for circulation. Nothing dramatic, just careful work, repeated, so the library can keep being what it promises to be: a place where access feels effortless, even though the effort is constant. Once a book has arrived and been verified, it still isn't ready for the shelf. Not in a public library. Because a library is not just a room with books. It's a retrieval system, and retrieval depends on order. That's what cataloging does. It gives each item a clear identity and a clear location in the larger map of the collection. The first layer is metadata, the descriptive information that makes a book searchable: title, author, publication date, edition, format, subjects, keywords, sometimes a summary. Metadata is what lets a person type a vague idea into a catalog and get something useful back. It's how "I need something about starting a small business" becomes a list of real options instead of a long walk through every shelf. Good metadata is also what connects books to each other. It groups titles by topic, links series together, separates similar authors, distinguishes one edition from another. It creates the quiet logic underneath discovery. Then comes classification. Classification is the library's decision about where the book belongs in the physical world. Libraries use systems like Dewey Decimal or Library of Congress classification, but the gentle idea is the same either way. Every subject gets an address, not because knowledge is perfectly tidy, but because people need a consistent way to find things again. Classification is a kind of compromise between how the world is and how we search for it. A single book can touch multiple topics, but it still has to live in one spot. So cataloging makes a choice: the primary subject, the best shelf neighborhood, the place most readers would expect to look first. And finally, that choice becomes a call number. A call number is the book's street address inside the library. It tells you the general subject area and then narrows down to the specific book. It's what allows shelves to remain stable even as thousands of items circulate. Without call numbers, reshelving becomes guesswork. Browsing becomes chaotic. Finding becomes frustrating. Call numbers also do something subtle. They make the library feel trustworthy. Because once you learn the system, even a little, you realize the building is predictable. You can return to the same subject area week after week and know it will still be there. You can go deeper, more specific, more curious, without feeling lost. The library becomes navigable, which is a quiet form of dignity. It respects your time. It doesn't make you beg for help at every step. Cataloging is rarely visible to patrons, but it shapes the entire experience. It turns a shipment of books into a collection. It turns a collection into a map. And it turns a map into something wonderfully simple: a shelf where what you're looking for is allowed to be found. This is the stage where a book stops being a retail object and becomes a piece of shared equipment. The first step is usually ownership marking, often a stamp, sometimes a printed label, sometimes both. It's simple, almost old-fashioned, but it matters. It quietly signals this belongs to the public collection. It's part of a system. It will come back, and it will be used again. Then come the tags and barcodes that connect the physical book to the digital record. The barcode is what the scanner reads at checkout and check-in. It's how the library knows where the item is in the circulation loop. On the shelf, on hold, checked out, returned, in transit. Without that link, the entire lending system becomes guesswork. Many libraries also add protective jackets or covers, clear jackets on hardcovers, durable coverings on paperbacks, reinforced corners, small choices that extend the lifespan of something that will be handled constantly. The goal is not to make the book pretty. The goal is to make it last, so the cost per reading keeps dropping over time. Finally, there are security strips or other anti-theft measures. These are not there because the library assumes the worst of people. They're there because openness has to be protected to remain open. When a collection loses too much inventory, the system becomes less useful for everyone. Security is one of the quiet ways the library defends fairness, so shared materials remain shared. All of this physical prep is repetitive, careful, and mostly invisible once the book is on the shelf. That's the point. It's the kind of work that disappears into the experience. When physical prep is done well, the patron never thinks about it. They just pick up a book, check it out, and take it home as if the book was always meant to circulate. And in a way, it was. Because these small steps, stamps, tags, jackets, security strips, are what convert a private product into public infrastructure. They are the gentle mechanics that let a single object become a community resource again and again. First placement on the shelf, the moment it becomes public property. After selection, ordering, cataloging, and physical prep, there's a quiet moment that doesn't look important if you don't know what you're seeing. The first placement on the shelf. A staff member rolls a card out from the back room. The book is in its final form now, labeled, tagged, recorded, ready to circulate. And when it's set into its place, between two other books with similar call numbers, something subtle happens. It stops being an item the library owns in storage. It becomes public property in practice, not in the legal sense, but in the lived sense. It is now available to be found. The book has moved from acquired to offered. It is no longer waiting for a process to finish. It is part of the commons. This is one of the quiet miracles of library economics. A new book arrives as a private product, manufactured, priced, shipped, and ends up as a shared resource, sitting in an orderly system that treats access as normal. The shelf placement is also where the library's invisible decisions become visible. The call number determines the neighborhood. The neighborhood shapes discovery. A book on parenting shelved among other parenting books becomes easier to stumble upon when you weren't looking for it. A book on small business, placed with other small business guides, becomes part of a practical ladder. Beginner ideas near more advanced ones, the shelf itself offering a progression. Sometimes the first placement is on a display instead of in the stacks. New arrivals, staff picks, seasonal themes. That's another gentle form of curation. Not an algorithm, not an ad, just a quiet invitation. This is here, and you might like it. And from that moment on, the book begins its real job. It waits, not in a neglected way, but in a ready way. It becomes one of many resources that can be taken without negotiation, used without payment, and returned without ceremony. The book may sit untouched for a while, or it may be checked out within an hour. Either way, the offer has been made. The book is now part of a system designed for shared use over time. If you're listening to this to fall asleep, you don't need to remember the steps. Just imagine the simple end of the pipeline: a cart, a shelf, a book sliding into place. A small, quiet moment. But it is the moment the library's promise becomes real. This belongs to the public now, not because it's free of cost, but because the cost has already been handled, so access can feel effortless. Once you notice how a library is organized, you start to realize something calming. The building is not random. It has a memory. It has a map. And that map is one of the quiet kindnesses the library offers. Most libraries use a classification system to decide where every book lives. The two most common are the Dewey Decimal System and the Library of Congress system. You don't need to memorize either one to benefit from them. You only need to feel what they accomplish. They take a huge, overwhelming idea, all the subjects people write about, and arrange them into neighborhoods. In many public libraries, Dewey is common. Dewey groups topics into numbered ranges, and those numbers act like a gentle set of directions. You begin with broad categories: history, science, art, language, and then the numbers narrow down into more specific territory. The decimals aren't there to be fancy. They're there to be precise, like adding an apartment number after a street address. In larger academic settings, Library of Congress is more common. It uses letters and numbers together, but the feeling is similar. Subjects are grouped, then subdivided, then placed into a stable order that can grow over time. What matters is not which system is used. What matters is what the system does to your experience. A classification system turns the shelves into something navigable. It reduces the anxiety of searching. It gives you a second chance even if you don't know the exact title you need. You can arrive with a rough idea. Something about starting a garden. Something about grief. Something about small business. Something about the Civil War. And the shelves can still help you. This is where organization becomes a kind of kindness, because without a map, the library would demand constant help from staff. And while staff are there to help, a good library also respects the quiet independence of browsing. It lets you find things without having to explain yourself. It lets you wander without feeling watched. It lets curiosity be private. Classification also creates a gentle side effect. It makes discovery easier. When books on similar subjects sit near each other, you don't just find one answer. You find a small ecosystem. The shelf becomes a conversation. You pull one title out, and the neighboring titles quietly suggest alternatives. Simpler, deeper, older, newer, more practical, more philosophical. The library doesn't force a recommendation. It just places related things close enough for you to notice. And that's the Dewey Decimal feeling, even if you've never called it that. It's the comfort of knowing that knowledge has an address, that the building's arranged with intention, that if you come back next week, the subject you care about will still be in the same neighborhood, waiting patiently on the same stretch of shelves. In a world where digital information can feel endless and unanchored, the library offers something steady, a physical order you can trust. Not perfect, not exhaustive, but stable enough to make searching feel calm. A quiet kindness built into the shelves themselves. Call numbers as addresses. A call number is the library's way of giving a book an address. Not a metaphorical address either, a practical one. It tells you where the book lives, where it returns to, and where it can be found again after it has traveled through dozens of hands. In a bookstore, a book can be anywhere. Tables change, displays move, stock rotates. But a library needs long-term order. It needs a system that survives constant circulation. Call numbers are how the library keeps its memory. You'll usually see the call number on a small label on the spine. It might look like a code at first, numbers, decimals, letters, maybe a few short lines stacked on top of each other. But the logic is simple. The call number places the book in a subject neighborhood, then narrows down to the specific title. It's like this. The first part gets you to the right street, the broad topic area. The next part gets you to the right building, the narrower subject. The final part gets you to the right apartment, the specific author or title. That's why two books on similar topics will often sit near each other, while two books by the same author might be separated if they're about different things. The library is organizing by subject first, because that's how many people search, not by knowing the exact title, but by knowing what they're interested in. Call numbers also make the library fairer and calmer. They mean you don't have to rely on luck or staff time to find what you need. You can learn a little of the system and become more independent each visit. And even if you never learn it formally, the system still helps you by keeping related materials grouped together. There's also a quiet comfort in having an address. An address means the book belongs somewhere. It's not just floating inventory. It has a home it returns to after every checkout. It's part of an ordered commons, shared property that doesn't dissolve into chaos because it's shared. And when you see a staff member shelving, you're watching that address system in action. They aren't just putting books away, they're restoring the map so the next person can walk in and find what they're looking for without friction. In that sense, call numbers are not just labels. They are one of the library's gentlest services, a promise that knowledge can be found again. Why order reduces anxiety. I can find it again. A lot of modern searching feels restless. You type something into a box, get a flood of results, open a few tabs, lose track, forget which one was useful, and then, if you step away for even a moment, you're not sure you could retrace your steps. The information might still be there, but your path to it feels fragile. The library offers a different feeling. Order you can trust. When books have stable places, the building becomes repeatable. You don't have to solve the whole library every time you visit. You learn it gradually, almost without noticing. The shelves start to feel familiar. The layout becomes a quiet memory, and that creates a simple comfort. I can find it again. That phrase matters more than it sounds, because anxiety often comes from uncertainty, not from effort. People will walk across a building if they believe it will be worth it. What's tiring is walking without knowing whether you're getting closer. The library reduces that fatigue by making location meaningful. Subjects live in consistent neighborhoods. Call numbers act like addresses. Signage helps you orient. Even the physical fact of this shelf in this section can be reassuring in a way a scrolling screen isn't. Order also reduces the social pressure of asking for help. Libraries are friendly, but not everyone feels comfortable walking up to a desk and explaining what they need, especially if it's personal, complicated, or hard to describe. A well-ordered space lets people browse privately and confidently. It gives them room to be unsure without feeling exposed, and it creates a kind of slow mastery. If you come in looking for one thing, say cookbooks, you start to notice what sits nearby. Next time, you don't need to start from zero. you already know the neighborhood. If you're learning something new, that familiarity is gentle encouragement. You don't feel like an outsider. You feel like someone returning to a place you can navigate. This is why library order isn't just about neatness. It's about making the building emotionally usable. It turns curiosity into something calm instead of stressful. It makes it easier to start, easier to return, easier to continue. It lets knowledge be a place you can revisit, not a chase you have to repeat. And for a public institution that serves everyone, beginners and experts, confident and overwhelmed, that quiet reduction of anxiety is one of its most valuable services. Browsing as a guided walk through human knowledge. There's a particular kind of learning that happens in a library that doesn't happen the same way online. Online, you usually arrive with a target. You search for a specific answer. You click, you skim, you leave. Even when you enjoy it, it can feel like you're jumping between islands. In a library, browsing is different. Browsing is walking. The shelves are arranged so that topics live beside related topics, like neighborhoods that blend into each other gradually. You might start in cooking and drift toward nutrition, from nutrition into health, from health into psychology, from psychology into education. The transitions are slow, physical, and surprisingly natural. This is one of the quiet gifts of classification systems. They don't just help you find a single book. They let you move through subjects in a way that mirrors how curiosity actually works, one thought leading to the next, without needing a new search term every 30 seconds. Browsing also works because the shelf has a kind of built-in limit. You can only see a certain number of titles at a time. The choices are contained. That containment makes the experience calmer. You don't feel buried under endless results. You feel like you're standing in front of a manageable slice of human effort. People who sat down, wrote things, edited things, published things, and placed their work into the world. And then, quietly, you choose. Sometimes you choose based on the title, sometimes the cover, sometimes the thickness, sometimes the publication date. Sometimes you flip to the table of contents and feel a small click of recognition. This is the one. In that sense, browsing is not random. It's guided by the structure of the building and also by your own instincts. The library creates the path. You decide where to stop. It's also guided by proximity to other minds. Every shelf is a small museum of how people have tried to explain the same topic in different ways. Beginner guides next to dense histories, practical manuals next to memoirs, broad introductions next to narrow deep dives. Even if you only take one book, you're quietly shown that knowledge has layers and that there are many ways to enter the same subject. And unlike an algorithm, the shelf doesn't push anything. It doesn't optimize for engagement. It doesn't learn your weaknesses. It doesn't try to keep you scrolling. It simply offers a physical landscape of ideas and lets you move at your own pace. So, when we talk about browsing as a guided walk through human knowledge, we mean something very literal. The library turns learning into a place you can inhabit. A place where curiosity can wander gently, without being rushed, and without being turned into a product. When you borrow a book, it can feel like a simple favor. You scan a card, you take the book, you leave. But behind that simplicity is a system doing careful operational work, more like a small logistics company than a cultural institution. Circulation is the library's engine. It's how shared property moves fairly through a community without turning into chaos. The first tool is the loan period. A loan period is a quiet agreement between the library and the patron. You can take this home for a set amount of time, and then it needs to come back so someone else can use it. Different items often have different loan periods because their demand and durability differ. A new release might circulate faster. A research book might stay out longer. The goal is not strictness, it's flow. Then there are renewals, which are the system's way of being flexible without being unfair. If no one is waiting, you can usually keep the item longer. The library extends trust because the cost of flexibility is low when demand is low. Renewals are a gentle design choice. They reduce friction, reduce unnecessary trips, and keep the relationship between patron and library calm. Holds are what make the system feel equitable. A hold is simply a place in line. Instead of whoever arrives first gets it, the library tracks requests and reserves the item for the next person when it returns. This is a rare kind of fairness in everyday life, a queue that doesn't require you to stand in it physically. You can go home and live your life while the system remembers your turn. And then there are notifications, the small messages that keep the whole loop moving. Your hold is ready. Your items are due soon. Your book has been renewed. These reminders aren't meant to pressure you. They're meant to reduce confusion. A logistics system works best when everyone knows what stage they're in. None of this is flashy. It's quiet operations, tracking, timing, routing, and smoothing the movement of items so the experience stays simple. The library doesn't treat checkouts like sales. It treats them like circulation events, objects moving through a shared cycle, governed by rules that are designed to keep things accessible and predictable. And the more you look at it that way, the more impressive it becomes. The library runs a high-volume lending system with minimal conflict, minimal transaction, and a surprisingly high level of trust. It is logistics with a soft voice, a system that says, in effect, take what you need for a while. We'll keep your place in line. And when you're ready, we'll help the next person too. Sorting returns, the back room as a small warehouse. If the public side of the library feels like a reading room, the back room feels more like operations. Not loud operations. No forklifts, no shouting, but the same basic purpose. Receive incoming items, sort them quickly, and route them to the next correct destination. The library's calm depends on this hidden space working well. When returns come in, through the slot at the desk, from a drop bin, they don't go straight back to the shelves. They enter a staging area first. Carts, bins, and tables become the library's temporary dock, where everything gets processed in a steady order. The first step is check-in. Items are scanned so the system updates their status, returned, available, in transit, or trapped in the middle of a hold queue. That scan is doing more than record keeping. It's how the library prevents confusion. It's how it avoids the small chaos of, I returned it, but it still says I have it. It's how fairness stays enforceable without being confrontational. Once items are checked in, the real warehouse logic begins, sorting by route. Most returns fall into a few practical categories: back to the shelves in the same building, to the hold process if someone is waiting, to another branch if the library system shares inventory, to repair or review if the item is damaged, incomplete, or questionable, to special handling for items with cases, parts, or formats that need checking. This is where the library quietly protects the quality of the collection. In a store, damage gets written off quickly. In a library, damage gets evaluated, A missing disc, torn pages, or a loose spine isn't just a defect, it's a problem for the next patron. Sorting returns is partly about moving items and partly about deciding whether each item is still fit for circulation. The back room also handles a constant reality of shared systems. Items don't come back evenly. Some days the return stream is heavy and the work becomes triage. Process what affects patrons first. Holds often rise to the top because a hold is a person waiting, then high-demand items, then everything else. It's an operations mindset with a human priority built into it, and the physical design matters. Carts are arranged to reduce wasted steps. Bins are labeled. Work surfaces are kept clear because clutter slows everything down. The back room isn't glamorous, but it's engineered for throughput. The faster returns are sorted correctly, the faster the public experience stays smooth. A library that feels well run usually has a back room that is quietly disciplined, because this is where the library's biggest economic advantage is protected: reuse. Every book that returns quickly and gets routed correctly increases the number of times the community can benefit from that single purchase. Circulation only works when the loop is tight, return to process, to reshelve, to borrow again. So the back room is a small warehouse with a gentle purpose. It doesn't exist to generate revenue. It exists to keep a shared system moving, calmly, accurately, and day after day, so that out on the public floor, the experience can remain what the library promises: simple access without friction. Metrics libraries track: circulation, visits, program attendance, light touch. Libraries are quiet places, but they still have to measure whether they're working. Not in the market sense. There's no revenue per customer scoreboard, but in a public service sense. A library is accountable to the community that funds it, and the simplest way to stay accountable is to track a few basic signals of use. The most obvious metric is circulation. How many items are checked out and returned? Circulation tells the library what's actually moving. It helps answer practical questions. Which collections are heavily used? Which formats are rising or falling? Do we need more copies of certain titles? Are parts of the collection aging out of relevance? Circulation is also a way of protecting the shared economy. The more an item circulates, the lower its cost per use, and the clearer its value becomes. Another metric is visits. How many people come through the doors? Visits matter because the library is not only about borrowing. People come to use the space, to read, study, apply for jobs, use computers, charge devices, attend meetings, or simply be somewhere calm. A high-visit library is often serving as a piece of civic infrastructure, even when circulation is steady rather than dramatic. Then there's program attendance, story times, workshops, community talks, tutoring sessions, book clubs, technology help. Attendance helps the library understand which programs are truly meeting needs and which ones are not landing. It also helps justify staff time and budget decisions because programs are labor-intensive. If a program consistently draws people, it becomes evidence that the library is supporting literacy, connection, and practical skills, not just lending materials. Some libraries also track computer sessions, Wi-Fi use, database clicks, meeting room reservations, and reference questions. But the basic trio, circulation, visits, and attendance, is enough to tell a quiet story. Are people using the library? How are they using it? And what kind of library does this community seem to want right now? The important thing is the tone of these numbers. In a business, metrics often exist to push for more sales, more growth, more conversion. In a library, metrics are often used to protect balance, keep hours sensible, keep collections relevant, keep programs aligned with real demand, and make sure the library is serving more than one type of patron. So the numbers stay light, not to reduce the library to a spreadsheet, but to ensure that the promise remains practical. The doors open. The shelves stay useful. The room stays alive with quiet use, holds as a reservation system for shared property. One of the most elegant parts of a public library is something you might barely notice: the hold system. In most parts of life, scarce items create competition. If something is popular, you either buy it quickly, pay more for it, or go without. But the library handles popularity with a different tool: quiet, procedural fairness. A hold is essentially a reservation. You're not buying access. You're placing your name into the system and asking to be next when the item becomes available. The library doesn't promise speed. It promises order. This is a small but meaningful economic idea. Shared property can be distributed through a queue instead of a price. When you put a hold on a book, you're entering a gentle line that you don't have to physically stand in. You can go home and forget about it for a while. The system will remember your place. That alone reduces stress. It turns waiting into something passive and calm rather than demanding and time-consuming. From the library's side, holds also help the collection behave intelligently. They reveal demand. If a title has a long wait list, the library can decide whether to buy additional copies or accept the queue as a normal part of shared use. It's a quiet feedback loop. The community signals interest, and the library adjusts within its budget. When the item is returned, the system routes it. Instead of going back to the general shelves, it may be pulled aside, scanned, and placed on the hold shelf, often behind the desk or in a designated pickup area. The book is now temporarily spoken for, not owned, just assigned. It waits for the next person in line, usually with a time window before it returns to circulation. The hold shelf is a small physical expression of fairness. It makes the invisible queue visible, but still private. Often, the book is labeled in a way that doesn't announce a full name. The library tries to protect dignity in small ways. You can pick up what you requested without feeling exposed. And there's something unusually calm about this whole arrangement. No bargaining, no auction, no scarcity panic, just a quiet promise. When it's your turn, you'll get a message, and your book will be waiting. In the gentle economics of public libraries, the hold system is one of the clearest examples of a public institution doing what markets don't naturally do on their own. It preserves access to popular things without letting popularity turn into exclusion. It turns demand into a queue and the queue into trust. A simple reservation system for shared property, fairness without drama. Why wait lists happen and how libraries decide number of copies. Wait lists in a library aren't a failure of the system. They're a sign that the system is being used the way it's designed to be used. A library collection is finite. Shelf space is finite. Budgets are finite. And a single copy of a book can only be in one place at one time, either on the shelf, on hold, or checked out to one reader. So when demand spikes, a wait list is simply the library's way of keeping access fair without turning the book into a bidding war. Wait lists happen most often for a few predictable reasons. A title is new and widely talked about. A book becomes popular again because of a film, a celebrity recommendation, or a school assignment. A topic surges: personal finance, health, test prep, local history, depending on what the community is going through. Digital formats are limited by licensing rules, so even copies online can have lines. In a store, the response to high demand is usually price and inventory. In a library, the response is a queue and a judgment call. How many copies should we reasonably carry? That decision is more careful than it might sound. Libraries don't want to underbuy because long wait lists frustrate patrons. But they also don't want to overbuy because demand often fades. A bestseller might be intensely popular for a few months and then settle into normal circulation. If the library buys too many copies, those extra copies take up shelf space and budget long after the peak has passed. So libraries use a mix of signals, hold-to-copy ratios. How many holds exist per available copy? If the line is long compared to supply, more copies may be justified. Time to serve. How long will the average person wait at current supply and loan period? If the wait becomes unreasonable, the library may add copies to protect the user experience. Budget reality. Every extra copy of a bestseller is money not spent elsewhere. Children's materials, nonfiction depth, local needs, databases, technology, programming. Libraries have to balance popularity with coverage, expected lifespan of demand. Some titles are flash demand, hot now, quiet later. Others remain steady for years. Libraries try to predict which category a title belongs to, knowing that prediction will never be perfect. Format and access needs. A library may need multiple formats of the same title: print, large print, audiobook, ebook, because copies aren't interchangeable for every reader. One person can read a paperback easily, another needs large print, another relies on audio. Serving everyone means supply decisions are not just about quantity, but about accessibility. The result is a very library-specific kind of inventory management, not maximizing profit, not maximizing novelty, maximizing usefulness over time. And wait lists are the honest part of that usefulness. They acknowledge a constraint without turning the constraint into a punishment. They say, we can't give this to everyone at once, but we can make sure everyone has a fair turn. That is the gentle economics behind the line, the dignity of the hold shelf and the emotional economics of patience and trust. The hold shelf is one of the quietest places in a library, but it carries a lot of meaning. On the surface, it's just a pickup area, a row of books and DVDs set aside behind a desk or in a designated section waiting for the next person in line. But the hold shelf is more than storage. It is where the library turns an abstract promise, fair access, into something you can actually feel. Most libraries label holds in a way that protects privacy. Not your full name displayed on a spine. Not a public announcement. Usually it's a first name and last initial, or a number or a code that only makes sense to the staff and the patron. That small design choice matters. It says, you can use this system without being put on display. This is part of the library's particular form of dignity. The library serves people in every kind of situation. People with plenty of time and people with none. People who are comfortable and people who are stressed. People who just want a novel and people who need something that feels closer to help. A hold might be a leisure read, but it might also be a test prep book, a citizenship guide, a manual for fixing something, a resource for grief, or a book a child needs for school. The library doesn't need to know why you requested it, and it doesn't force you to explain. The hold shelf simply makes your request real, quietly, without commentary. And then there's the waiting itself. In the market economy, waiting often feels like failure. If you really want something, the system teaches you to pay more to avoid the line. Expedited shipping, premium access, VIP seating, subscription tiers. Waiting becomes a penalty assigned to the people who can't afford to skip it. The hold system offers a different lesson. It says, you don't have to buy your way to the front. You can take your place in line and your place will be respected. That's a rare experience, and it creates what you might call emotional economics, how a system makes people feel about their relationship to it. A well-run hold system reduces anxiety because it gives waiting a structure. You don't have to obsessively check for availability. You don't have to compete. You don't have to rush to the library on the exact day a book returns. The system holds your spot. It remembers on your behalf. When it's your turn, you'll get a notice, and the item will be waiting for you for a reasonable window of time. That is not just convenient. It is psychologically stabilizing. It turns scarcity into something orderly instead of stressful. And it creates trust, one of the most valuable forms of capital a public institution can build. Trust means you believe the system will do what it says it will do. You believe your place won't disappear. You believe the book won't be quietly handed to someone more important. You believe the library is operating by the same rules for everyone. In daily life, that kind of fairness can feel surprisingly rare, which is why the library's version of it feels so soothing. Patience also changes when it's supported by trust. Waiting without trust feels like being stuck. Waiting with trust feels like a normal part of a shared world. You can be patient because you're not being neglected. You're simply in a sequence. Your turn is coming, and you don't have to fight for it. And then, one day you walk in, and the hold shelf delivers its small reward. Your book is there, not displayed as proof of status, not wrapped in marketing, not limited edition, just waiting. That simple moment is a public system doing something quietly humane, treating you as a participant, not a customer, recognizing your place, respecting your privacy, and making good on a promise that depends on the community agreeing to play fair. In the gentle economics of public libraries, the hold shelf is not just where books sit. It's where patience becomes practical and trust becomes visible. Even a well-funded library is limited by its own shelves. Space is finite. Budgets are finite. No single building can hold every title, every edition, every niche topic, every out-of-print book someone suddenly needs. And yet, libraries regularly give patrons access to far more than what their local branch owns. That larger reach is made possible through interlibrary loan and through regional sharing systems that operate so quietly most patrons barely notice they exist. At the center of it are sharing agreements, formal, practical arrangements between libraries that decide how they cooperate. Some systems are tightly integrated, where multiple branches across towns share one catalog and one pool of items. Others are looser partnerships, where separate library systems agree to lend to each other under certain rules. Either way, the logic is the same. It is more efficient and more humane to share knowledge than to duplicate everything. This is one of the purest examples of cooperative economics in everyday life. Stores compete. They differentiate. They guard inventory. They try to keep you inside their walls. Libraries do the opposite. Libraries extend the walls. Interlibrary loan is the quiet proof that a public institution can grow in value through cooperation instead of competition. When a patron requests an item from another location, The system begins a small journey. Somewhere, another library pulls the requested book from its shelf. It gets scanned so its status changes from available to in transit. It's placed into a bin or tote, often labeled by destination, and added to a scheduled route. Then the book travels, usually in a way that looks almost mundane. A van, a courier run, a routine delivery loop that moves materials between branches and towns. There's nothing romantic about the transportation itself, and that's part of what makes it impressive. It's not a special event, it's a normal service. The network runs because it's routine, repeatable, and planned. Along the way, the book is scanned again and again. Each scan is a quiet checkpoint, picked up, arrived at sorting, routed to the next stop, delivered to the receiving library, processed, placed on the hold shelf. This repeated scanning isn't bureaucracy. It's how the system remains trustworthy. It prevents items from vanishing into the gaps between buildings. It makes movement trackable without making the experience complicated for the patron. And what the patron experiences is remarkably simple. They request a title. They wait. They get a notice. They pick it up at their local library as if it had always lived there. This is the library doing what good infrastructure always does, hiding complexity so the public experience can stay calm. Interlibrary loan also reveals something important about how libraries think. They are not trying to win against each other. They aren't trying to keep a monopoly on good books. They are trying to increase access across a region. In a cooperative economy, the success of one node strengthens the network. If another town has a specialized collection, your town benefits. If your town has a strong children's selection, theirs benefits. The system becomes richer not because everyone buys everything, but because everyone contributes something and agrees to share. That's why interlibrary loan often feels like a whisper network. Not secretive, just understated. A quiet channel between institutions that says, if we have it, you can use it. And for many patrons, that creates a small kind of magic. You walk into one building in your own town, and it turns out that building has reach. Not unlimited reach, but surprisingly far reach. It can pull a book from across the county, across the region, sometimes across the state, depending on the system. The feeling is simple and powerful. Your library can reach farther than its walls. In the gentle economics of public libraries, interlibrary loan is a reminder that access doesn't always come from owning more. Sometimes access comes from cooperating better. A shared catalog, a scheduled route, a bin, a van, a few scans, and a book that arrives quietly, as if the world of knowledge is a little closer than you thought. In a library, the most important technology is often a person. Not because librarians are replacing computers or databases, but because they make the entire system usable. They are the living interface between the public and a large, complex set of resources. And much of that work doesn't announce itself. It happens in calm voices, short interactions, and quiet problem solving that leaves no trace once the moment passes. One of the clearest examples is the reference interview. That phrase sounds formal, but the experience is simple. Someone comes to the desk with a question that isn't fully formed, and the librarian helps shape it into something searchable. People rarely ask for exactly what they need. They ask for what they can name. I need information about starting a business. I'm looking for something on anxiety. I need help with my resume. Do you have books on retirement? These questions carry hidden details: timeline, difficulty level, local requirements, specific constraints, and a good librarian gently draws those details out without making the person feel tested. It's not interrogation, it's translation. The librarian helps you find what you mean, not just what you ask. And this matters economically because searching is expensive in human time. Confusing systems waste hours. Bad information costs money. A small amount of guidance at the right moment can save someone from a wrong form, a wrong deadline, a wrong resource, or a dead end that makes them give up. The library's value isn't only the material it owns, it's the guidance that helps people actually use it. Then there's the everyday problem solving that keeps the library functioning as a bridge to modern life. Printers jam, passwords fail, websites time out, government portals are confusing, job applications demand uploads, logins, verification codes, and file formats that don't behave. A lot of people arrive at the library not because they love paperwork, but because the outside world has made a basic task feel impossible without help. This is where librarians and staff become quietly practical. They help someone attach a document. They show someone how to scan an ID. They help reset an email password. They explain why a form won't submit. They walk someone through saving a file in the right place. It's not glamorous, but it's deeply consequential because it often sits right next to employment, benefits, housing, education, and healthcare. And the tone matters. The library is one of the few places where you can admit quietly, "I don't know how to do this." And the response is not embarrassment or impatience, but steady assistance. At the same time, openness requires boundaries. A library is designed to welcome everyone, which means it has to manage a wide range of behaviors, needs, and crises within a shared space. Staff balance compassion with safety. They enforce rules that protect the environment, noise, harassment, hygiene, time limits on computers, respectful conduct, not to control people, but to keep the space usable for the whole community. This is another form of labor that doesn't announce itself, maintaining a calm atmosphere without turning the library into a punitive place. It takes judgment. It takes consistency. It takes knowing when to intervene and when to simply let a harmless situation pass. It also takes systems, policies that are clear, procedures that are fair, and a staff culture that supports de-escalation over confrontation whenever possible. And underneath all of it is emotional labor, patience, repeated all day, neutrality, treating patrons with respect regardless of background, mood, or circumstance, a calm presence that helps set the temperature of the room. People often match the energy they're given. A quiet, steady staff can make a space feel safer without saying much at all. This is why the librarian as infrastructure is not just a compliment, it's an accurate description. Infrastructure is something you rely on without thinking about it until it breaks. It's what allows other activities to happen smoothly. Librarians and library staff are that kind of support. The human system that makes the building's resources reachable, the technology usable, and the public space stable. In the gentle economics of public libraries, the shelves matter, but the people who keep the shelves meaningful, who guide, troubleshoot, protect, and steady the space, are part of what makes the library feel like it's truly open to everyone. If the library were only a place to borrow books, it would still be valuable. But most modern libraries quietly do something else too. They run a steady schedule of small free events that build long-term outcomes. Programs are not the loud part of the library. They're usually modest. Chairs in a circle, a children's rug, a whiteboard, a sign-in sheet, a gentle start time. But economically, they're one of the library's most interesting services because they convert public funding into something that compounds over time: skills, habits, and confidence. Storytime is the easiest example to understand, and it doesn't need to be oversold. A few songs, a few books, a familiar voice reading slowly, a room where children learn to sit near other children and listen. Parents and caregivers pick up small techniques without being lectured: how to ask a question about a picture, how to repeat a new word, how to make reading feel normal instead of like homework. That's early literacy economics in its gentlest form. Not a grand intervention, just routine exposure, language heard repeatedly, attention practiced in small doses, comfort with books built before a child ever thinks of reading as school. The payoff isn't immediate, and that's the point. It's a long horizon investment made with a soft voice. Libraries also create spaces for teenagers, which is a different kind of public good. A teen area is often one of the few places where young people can exist without being treated as a problem to be managed or a customer to be extracted. They can sit, read, meet friends, use computers, attend a workshop, join a club, or just be somewhere safe and supervised without being pressured to buy anything. That matters more than people admit, because adolescence is when routines and identities get shaped. Then there are the programs aimed at steady adult life: tutoring sessions, job search help, resume workshops, basic technology classes, book clubs, author talks, guest speakers, and community conversations. Some of these are educational, some are social, some are purely practical. The library doesn't always separate those categories, because in real life they blend together. A person may come for a lecture and leave with a new connection. A person may join a book club and quietly rebuild a routine. A person may attend a tutoring session and gain the confidence to try again. That confidence is part of the library's return on investment. Public budgets often struggle to measure outcomes that are emotional and behavioral, but libraries produce them constantly. The confidence to ask a question, the confidence to sit in a room and learn, the confidence to belong in a public space without feeling out of place. Belonging is a kind of economic stability. People do better when they feel anchored. Routines matter. A weekly story time, a monthly book club, a regular tutoring hour. These are small appointments that turn into structure. The library becomes part of someone's calendar, and that alone can be a gentle form of support. And all of this is amplified by one of the library's most overlooked assets: the community room. Community rooms are often the civic living room of a town. They host meetings, classes, support groups, clubs, workshops, local boards, volunteer trainings, and small public gatherings that would otherwise need to rent a private space. That rental cost might be minor for some groups and impossible for others. The library removes that barrier quietly. It makes civic activity easier. It gives local life somewhere to happen indoors, with chairs and tables and a neutral atmosphere. This is why library programs are not just extras. They're one of the ways a library turns access into participation. Not everyone will check out a stack of books, but many people will come to a room, sit down, and take part in something steady and human. Over time, those small events build the kind of outcomes that don't show up in a transaction log: stronger literacy, better job readiness, calmer routines, more connection, more confidence. And that is a very gentle kind of return, earned slowly and shared widely. If you haven't visited a library in a while, one of the surprises is how much of it is no longer just books. The public library is still a reading place, yes, but it has also become a kind of tool library. a shared collection of useful things that are expensive to own, easy to borrow, and often needed at exactly the wrong time. This is a natural extension of the library's original economic idea. The library figured out long ago that one purchase can serve many households as long as the item can circulate. That logic doesn't stop at novels. Many libraries lend DVDs and Blu-rays, audiobooks, magazines, and of course, ebooks. Some offer streaming services through library apps. Some lend museum or park passes, letting families access cultural spaces that might otherwise feel out of reach. The specific offerings vary by community, but the pattern is consistent. The library uses shared funding to lower the cost of participation in everyday life. Technology lending is where this becomes most practical. A laptop loan, a Wi-Fi hotspot, a tablet, a set of headphones. These aren't luxury items anymore. They're the doorway to school, work, healthcare, and government services. For a household that can't easily replace a broken computer or can't afford stable internet, borrowing technology can be the difference between "I meant to apply" and "I did apply." Even when people have devices, they don't always have the right device. Job applications and official portals often work better on a full computer than on a phone. Uploading documents, formatting a resume, printing and scanning forms, these tasks can be difficult on mobile. The library quietly fills that gap. Meeting rooms extend the same shared economy logic into space. A small business owner can meet a client. A study group can gather. A local club can hold a meeting. A nonprofit can train volunteers. Renting a room elsewhere costs money. The library turns it into a public resource, scheduled, fair, and usually free or very low cost. Maker spaces and specialized tools, where they exist, push this idea even further. 3D printers, sewing machines, recording equipment, design software, woodworking tools, learning kits. Not every library has these, but the economics are the same. Many people can benefit from occasional access without anyone needing to own expensive equipment they'll only use a few times. This is where lending tools changes household economics in a direct way. Ownership is costly not just because of the purchase price, but because of maintenance, storage, upgrades, and replacement. For high-income households, those costs are inconvenient. For low-income households, they're destabilizing. One broken printer can become a major problem when school requires printed forms. One lost internet connection can create a chain reaction of missed appointments and incomplete applications. Borrowing turns big, sudden costs into manageable access. It also reduces waste. Items that would sit unused in private homes most of the year can be used steadily across a community. The library makes the same object valuable many times over, which is one of the cleanest forms of shared economy there is. And underneath all these services is a simple, repeating theme. Access is cheaper than ownership. That's true for books, for movies, for software, for meeting space, for specialized equipment, and for technology. The library's model is not about everyone owning everything. It's about the community owning a set of resources together so individuals can borrow what they need when they need it, without the financial shock of buying it. In a market world that often treats access as a premium feature, the library quietly treats access as a baseline, not because it's costless, because it's worth sharing. In the physical library, free is easy to understand. A book is purchased once, processed once, and then it can circulate for years. The object sits on a shelf ready for the next person, and the economics are mostly visible. One copy, many readers. Digital access is different. Digital resources feel frictionless to the patron. Tap, download, listen. But behind that smooth experience is a modern tension. Most digital content is not owned the way a library owns a physical book. It is licensed. That one word changes the economics. With ebooks and audiobooks, libraries often pay for the right to lend a title under specific rules. The rules can look strange from the outside: limited checkouts, time-based expiration, and copies that behave like artificial scarcity. You might think a digital book should be infinitely lendable, but the library's contract usually doesn't work that way. The library is essentially renting lending rights, and those rights can be expensive. This is why digital waitlists happen. Even though the file is digital, the license may only allow a certain number of simultaneous borrowers: 1 copy, 2 copies, 10 copies. When demand spikes, the hold queue appears again, just like it does for physical materials. The waitlist isn't a technical limitation, it's a licensing limitation. And audiobooks in particular can be costly because they're popular, heavily used, and often priced for institutional lending in a way that's very different from personal purchase. The library has to decide how much digital access it can afford, knowing that digital demand can rise quickly and stay high. Then there are databases. Databases are one of the library's most valuable and least visible services. Research tools, newspaper archives, academic journals, genealogy resources, language learning, test prep platforms, legal and medical references. These are the quiet power tools of modern knowledge. Many patrons use them from home and never think about what they cost. But database subscriptions can be large recurring expenses, sometimes more than what you'd imagine from looking at the physical shelves. A single renewal can cost the equivalent of a substantial book order. And unlike print, which can sit on a shelf for a decade, database access disappears the moment the subscription ends. The library isn't buying an object, it's buying ongoing permission. This is the new cost of free, recurring fees for invisible services that the public experiences as simply available. Digital also raises another gentle but important value: privacy. Most commercial digital platforms are designed to track behavior: what you click, what you finish, what you linger on, what you search for. The tracking becomes part of the business model. Libraries have traditionally held a different stance, that reading and information seeking should not require surveillance. In practice, libraries try to minimize data collection, protect borrower records, and choose vendors and settings that align with that tradition as much as they can. This doesn't always make things simple, because modern digital ecosystems are built around accounts, analytics, and data. But the library's instinct is often to keep the patron from becoming the product. And that's the balancing act of the modern library: adapting without turning into a sales platform. Libraries add digital lending, Wi-Fi, apps, and online services because that's where life has moved. But they try to keep the spirit of the place intact. No upsells, no ads, no premium tier, no pressure to buy the next thing. The library wants the digital doorway to feel like the physical doorway: open, calm, and non-transactional. So digital collections don't replace the old library economics. They complicate it. They introduce licensing instead of ownership, renewals instead of permanence, and new costs that are easy to overlook because they don't sit on a shelf. And yet the purpose remains the same: to keep knowledge within reach, even as the formats change, quietly paying the new costs so the public can continue experiencing something simple: access without a sales pitch. As the day thins out, the library starts to change its posture. not abruptly, not with a sharp announcement, just with small signals that the public hours are nearing their end. A few chairs scrape softly as people gather their things. A laptop closes. A book is finished, or simply paused with a finger marking the place. At the desk, the last practical tasks continue. A final checkout, a question answered, a quick reminder about a hold window, a quiet, "You're welcome." In the background, returns are still being handled. Items come through the slot or across the counter, get scanned, and settle briefly into carts. The system doesn't stop just because the day is ending. It just slows. There's a familiar rhythm to closing time. Carts are straightened and staged for tomorrow's shelving. Stray books are gathered from tables and chairs and returned to their neighborhoods. Computer stations are checked and reset. Printers are quieted. Lights begin to dim in sections, leaving the building a little softer than it was at noon. Then the doors are locked, not as a rejection, but as a boundary, because even public space needs rest, maintenance, and a clean reset. A library that never closes would eventually stop being calm. Closing is part of how the library stays usable. In the quiet after the last patron leaves, the building becomes itself again. Shelves, carpet, air, the faint hum of systems still running. It's a resting place in a literal sense. A public building that pauses overnight, not to disappear, but to return. And that return is the larger story, the long horizon economics that libraries represent. Libraries aren't built for immediate payoff. They're built for decades. They make sense only if you think in long time. A book purchased once can serve hundreds of readers. A child who attends story time grows into a student who uses the computers, then into an adult who borrows manuals, then into a parent who brings their own child back. The value compounds quietly, not in headlines, but in habits. This is what makes the library such an unusual economic institution. It invests in people without demanding a purchase. It maintains a shared collection without extracting profit. It offers space without requiring you to earn your right to sit there. It treats dignity as part of the service. And when you add it all together, the budgets, the cataloging, the hold shelves, the vans moving books across town, the staff answering questions, the printers stubbornly helping people complete real tasks, you start to see the true shape of the library's value. It is quiet value. Value that doesn't flash. Value that doesn't shout. Value that is measured in access, not margins. A public library is one of the few places where the world's pace is gently reduced on purpose, where time is allowed to stretch, where knowledge is allowed to be slow, where you can be curious without being marketed to, and where you can be present without being turned into a customer. So as we end, you don't need to hold on to every idea, just the feeling of the place, the last cart rolling to a stop, the lights dimming in a familiar order, the doors locking with a soft final click, a building resting, not finished, just paused. Because tomorrow it will open again, and the offer will be the same, steady and uncomplicated. Come in, take what you need, leave without a receipt. And if you're listening to this as you drift toward sleep, you can let the library do what it has always done. Hold things gently, keep them safe, and return them when the time is right. Good night.